Hey, Shore Life, I wanted to give a quick devotion again to remind ourselves, in light of all that's going on in our world right now, there are many things from God that do not change. And so we've talked about how our peace, it doesn't matter who gets elected into office, our peace does not change because our peace comes from God and not from any elected official, the one we want or the one we don't want. And last week we talked about our hope. Our hope does not change because it comes only through faith in Jesus Christ, not through any man, not through any political system or form of government. This week I want to talk about our protection, our safety. When you read through the Old Testament, you see that a lot of times the prophets and the men and women of God were put through some pretty horrific things. I think of Daniel, how he had to face opposition just for praying and was put into the lion's den. God didn't protect him by keeping him out of the lion's den. God protected him in the lion's den. He had his friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego who wouldn't bow down to an image that was not of God. And so they were put into a fiery furnace. In fact, the governing officials put every piece of clothing on them possible and cranked the heat up on the furnace even higher. God did not protect them by keeping them out of the furnace. These men had to face thinking that they were going to die, even saying, hey, we may die here, but we still trust in our God. And God protected them in the fiery furnace. Over and over, God protected Elijah in the face of opposition from the worshipers of Baal. God protected Moses. God protected the people of Israel. God protected Isaiah. God protected Jeremiah. But they all had to go through some very horrific things. I just finished reading Jeremiah recently, and the opposition that he experienced from the kings of Judah during his time, and he was put into captivity. He was thrown down a well left to die until people begged to be able to give him food. What? For obeying God. God didn't keep him from the horrific incidences. He protected them within those things. We're living in a time where, I don't know how you gauge horrific. We're battling a pandemic. We're battling the divisiveness of a country. We're battling the oppositions to our faith. I dare say it's nowhere close to the horrificness of many of the things in the Bible. We're not being threatened with a furnace or a lion's den. And sometimes we think, God, why wouldn't you just keep me from these horrific things? And that's never God's promise. God's promise is the protection within the world. I want to read a passage from John 17. John chapter 13 through 17, it's called the Upper Room Discourse. This is Jesus in the upper room during the Last Supper with his disciples. At the end of this supper, they'd go out and pray, and Jesus would be arrested. So this is his last night with his disciples on earth. And he starts by washing their feet, and then he does a lot of teaching with them. Also, he watches Judas march off to betray him. In John 17, the last chapter of the Upper Room Discourse, Jesus prays for the disciples. And just one short part of that prayer in John chapter 17, verse 13, Jesus praying to the Father, he says, I am coming to you, God, now. But I say these things while I'm still in the world, so that they may have the full measure of my joy within them. I have given them your word, and the world has hated them. For they are not of the world any more than I am of the world. My prayer is not that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. They are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. Sanctify them by the truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world. For them I sanctify myself, that they too may be truly sanctified. And Jesus is asking the Father, hey, I know we're not going to take them out of this world. We're here to glorify God. We're here to live, to tell other people about the kingdom gospel and tell people about Jesus Christ. But the promise is that God the Father will protect us in this world. That doesn't mean nothing bad's going to happen. What it means is that God is with us throughout whatever happens, whatever we encounter. We know that God the Father is with us, always with us, that we were never out of his care, never out of his plan. And we can trust him for that. And what is the worst the world can do for us but end our life? And yet then we would be with Christ in glory. And so this prayer wasn't just for the disciples, because the next verse 20, Jesus says, my prayer is not for them alone, not just for the disciples. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message. That's me. That's you. If you've accepted the testimony of the disciples and their word, if you have faith in Jesus Christ, that he is the Messiah who died on the cross and rose from the grave, then you have believed because of the testimony of the disciples, and Jesus is praying for you. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one, I in them and you in me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. We are protected by the Father. He goes through the fire with us. He goes through the water with us. He goes through every trial with us. His eye is on those who are suffering, not to remove us out of the suffering, but to be with us through the suffering. And none of us suffers to the extent of Jesus, who suffered on our behalf for us. This election season is ugly, uglier than most have ever seen. I have not lived through as many elections as some of you. That just means you're wiser. But I hear over and over, I've never seen our country this divided, this hateful, this angry with each other. It doesn't matter the results of the election. And so we could set the anger and the frustration and all those things aside, and we could focus on Christ, who offers us peace beyond our understanding, who offers us hope beyond this world, and who offers us protection, absolute protection while we are here, so we are never out of his care. Never once. Regardless of who our president is, regardless of who represents us in Washington, D.C., regardless of who opposes the work of Christ. Hold on to these truths. We'll talk another truth next week. I hope to see you this weekend. I love you all. Have a great Thursday, and we'll talk to you soon.